Brent, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it. I'm glad you survived the oddities of the weather and we got you here. Good deal. Not long ago, you and I got to hang out and spend some time together, and we were talking about just data centers, et cetera. And one of the things that really caught my imagination was you were saying something, different perspective, but not dissimilar from some friends of mine that are in the, or people I've got to know that have been on the podcast before, from Doxel. And one of the things they use is they use software tools to help evaluate a construction site and construction process as it's going to see where you're at, help prevent rework, all these other things. And their big point was, where I thought there was a common intersection, was, look, we're still building things. We can operate the most complex environments on Earth with a combination of tools and people to a degree of accuracy unparalleled in human history. But we still have so much waste, so much rework. We still are building in so many ways, or running at least into the same problems that we have since we've been building buildings. Yeah. And you said different, coming from it from a different angle, but not dissimilar. What did you mean, and why did you think that?
Yeah, no, I think so. I'm a recovering architect, right? So I'm good with crayons. I've got to live with that the rest of my life. But it's given me a good bit of insight on, kind of transitioning from a design role to a tech startup kind of world to where I landed now. And I've always leaned on that idea is, why are we still building the way we're building? Like, and it's this construct we all live in. And from a manufacturer side, there's an opportunity to change, right? In terms of how we put things together. And I'm fascinated with this idea of that we would design things differently if we had better intentions and optimization and deconstruction, ways to be, utilize materials better and utilize buildings more efficiently. Manufacturers would build their products differently if we had that goal in mind versus just to consume and install on a building. Architects would design things differently. Contractors would build and construct knowing, oh, I'm also going to take this apart, right? That's a very different kind of mindset instead of turning keys over, buy, and you're on to the next project. And then that whole end of life kind of solution. Like, there's this whole construct that I think we're all starting to struggle. How do we disrupt that? How do we change it? And it's such a big ask that it almost seems, insurmountable, right? Like this idea of circularity. I think that's one of the things we're talking about, is this idea of circularity. And it's such a timely conversation and such a big word that no one really knows what it is, because we all have to stay in our sector and say, what does it mean to me? How do I fix these problems? It's fascinating, right?
Well, what do you mean by circularity?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to kind of, if you look at your own sector, it's if you're making something, if you're making products or building materials, it's, what are those input pieces? What are you making the product with? How are you making the product? And what does that look like, knowing there's a different end goal? The installation and use phase is probably similar. I think the installation changes. There's no more gluing everything down, a lot of more mechanical fastening, saying, this has, the Lego idea, right? Like, we all grew up playing with Legos and putting stuff apart and taking apart and, deconstructing things. I mean, I had a funny conversation with a friend of mine that was, their kids are in that phase now where they're just taking toys and disassembling the whole thing and saying, I'm going to make something new out of that. We all did that as little kids, right? Or some of us, I guess the more weird creative ones did. And it never turned into anything. You broke whatever you took apart and, and then it just went in the trash. Yeah. But there's more to that in what the real world of buildings go together is, can we take it apart, repurpose it, reuse it, reinstall it somewhere else, right? And that changes a lot of those components, right? And I think data centers are a great example, distribution centers, thinking of how we put things together or construct or design them in the idea of, could I design for repurpose? Like, it's a big shell. Could I reorganize the space in 5 years? Maybe it's not what I built today. Maybe it's something completely different in 5 and 10 years. You see a lot of, and we have so much buildings already constructed. We don't need to build everything new. We have so much square footage of buildings that need to be repurposed, refurbed, retrofit, right? Prime real estate that just doesn't have that same use phase, right? And we're like, well, we'll just keep moving outside the urban context. We'll just keep going out and out. We're in Duluth, right? Like, we're not in downtown Atlanta because Atlanta's sprawled to such a massive area, right? There's no more footprint left downtown.
Right.
It's fascinating. It comes back to, I feel like this is the central pull that we all need to focus on is this has to be a capitalism for good conversation, right?
Yeah.
Neither one of us
We call
work
that ethical capitalism.
Exactly.
Right.
It is. It's critical because neither one of us work for a nonprofit, right?
Right.
Like we're, for-profit businesses that are very large, that are
Right.
global, and having the financial and the commercial impact benefit the business really. And it can't just. And I think I know we can talk about this in terms of how we set some of these targets, these global targets for our business. You have to change the mindset of a typical capital deployment. It's not an ROI of 2 years or 3 years. You kind of readjust those baselines, right? Is 5 years or 7 years acceptable, right? 20 years, 30 years, like that's pushing. You're not going to get a CFO to buy into that, right? A CEO is going to be like, oh, this is what we're looking to do. But if we can constrain that and get it as close to the norm as possible,
Yeah.
I think you get interest, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot. We went through this project we're currently renovating our headquarters in Florida, and we evaluated demoing the whole building, right? We have our manufacturing site across the road and our headquarters on the other side. Demo the whole building and rebuild, whatever we imagine, or take what the bones of that building are and repurpose it, right? And we did a whole building life cycle assessment, and both financially and carbon wise, it was significantly more attractive for us to gut the building to the steel and to the concrete, add the additional square footage we needed to grow, and repurpose that whole building. We went through a full recycling materials. We repurposed all the materials. We took the ceiling tiles out. We took the carpet back. We took the gypsum back. There's a story there because it wasn't easy, right? We talk about that circularity of how, this circular economy and we can do this. I had to pull every favor I had in my bag of tricks with all my contacts at all these other companies.
Right.
It was a huge pain in the ass, right? It was, I'm not going to lie. It was hard to do.
Right.
And you had to drive through like, we can do it. Let's show that we can do it. I think that's very applicable to any of these kind of things. Like you have to show what is the value, what are we committed to, right? And what is a reasonable payback and what's the win? So a good example of the way I can kind of frame this just from my experience recently is we took on a renovation project of our headquarters, right? We outgrew our space, needed to evaluate demoing the building as it was and rebuilding anything we could imagine. It's across the street from our manufacturing suite. We have the space. Or what does it look like if we repurpose and reuse the building, the bones of this building? Did some consulting and did a whole life cycle assessment of the building, both environmentally in terms of embodied carbon and cost effectiveness. We leaned into, we can take this building as is and repurpose it and still get everything we want. Now, I'm not going to lie. It was not easy, right? We talked about really going all out. We took all the panels off. We took the roof off. We recycled and reused and repurposed all that material back into making product that we were going to put on the building. That's a little easier because it's us. It's our products. But then we get into the ceiling tiles. We got into recycling and taking back carpet and gypsum board and glass and aluminum. It was not easy, right? Like I had to pull every favor and every trick out of the book to bring all these people and all these other colleagues at all these companies and say, where do I do with this? Where do I put this gypsum that you can reuse it, recycle it, and remake it, and we can buy something back from you? We're not there, right? I think we all think it's an easier. We've closer than we've ever been, but it's not easy, right? And I think making the financial accountability to that, and it has to work, right? We can only do so many pilot projects or let's make this work as a case study. No, I want really to get your CFO on board and say, this is what we should be doing, right? And we can look at more projects that way. We talked about that ROI has to be adjusted to be a little bit different and a little more flexible, but I think the uptake's getting there, right? You are correct. You can't just every existing building can't accept every use type, right? There's different types of loads and infrastructure, like you said. But I really do feel that if we look hard enough, there's a lot of opportunities sitting out there in real estate, especially where we are now. 5 years after, we've got so much real estate that's gone empty, that's changed hands, that's being repurposed. It's a prime time to do it. We can't just keep building everything new.
One of the things you said, and we didn't have time to tease it out then, I'm curious now, is you said this is a significant, I loved how you prefaced it. You said this is not a political thing. And isn't it weird that we're in the space and time that we have to preface because of the administration, and I'm not even talking about the current administration, just we're in a season where there's a lot of, static in the air. That aside, you said, look, it is a significant challenge. It's a sizable problem, and a lot of people don't understand it. What did you mean by sizable problem, and what is it that we don't understand?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because we've the beginning of last year, we went through. I went and met with our entire commercial team, right? And I was like, you guys really absolutely need to understand the sustainability side of our story, of our business, and how we connect with our customers. And you get those pushback. You get the people that are in that boat, right? The people in the middle, and they're the ones that are like, I'm not buying into any of this. And I was like, it's a fair point. I totally get that.
Right.
But it's not political, right? These are not political conversations because 40% of all the embodied carbon that's produced in the environment comes from the construction sector, right? I mean, 28-ish% comes from the operational side, carbon and energy, and that other kind of 12% comes from the physical making of materials and building products. That's a huge impact. Like we, as all part of the constructor sector, have to take accountability for that. 30% of all the waste generated across the globe comes from construction. Think about that. 30%. I mean, it's not just throwing stuff in your trash can. This is job sites. This is building stuff and taking stuff apart. We have to do better than that. We're sitting with all the other technology and all the stuff that we're talking about. Construction is like a battleship. We're like a dinosaur of an industry that has to change, right? So I think that's where, to your point, it has nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with, who's in office or who's not, or what the policies are. The companies have to look internally and say, we have to be more responsible. We're a big business. We're accountable. We leave a big footprint or could leave a big footprint. How do we change it?
Right.
You're a startup. You're a small business. You're very nimble. You have the ability to be flexible and change, just as much aligned, right? I mean, I'm sure you guys see it. People come to work for businesses now that they align with the values and not just some mission statement or something on a wall. I think they really look into what are they doing? Like, are you actually doing what you're saying?
That's right.
That to me, I think I said this before too, is it's really easy. I said this in the presentation. It's really easy to set targets. We went through this whole hyper cycle a couple of years ago where everybody on the planet was setting some sort of environmental or sustainability goal, right? 2030, 2035, 2040, 2050.
Right.
Who at that company is working at 2050 that's going to be accountable
Especially
for that?
if they're a public company where that CEO changes every few years.
Totally. So it's like, how do we take that, compress it down and say, show me what you mean, act and deliver that. And I think that's where when you do that, you naturally kind of pull people together that are aligned, right? Big businesses, public companies say, okay, this is more than just talk. They're walking the walk and they're actually executing. There's a ton to learn from that, right? And I think a lot of what I think you and I both do is it's not just about bragging or saying you're doing a great job. Look at all the things that we've done. Right. It's how do I share that? How do I save the other person in our industry from going through all those pains? Because we don't have time. We've got to cut we're at, like 54 gigatons of carbon that we're emitting. We've got to cut that in half. I mean, that's almost impossible by 2030 now. But if we can hyper on-ramp everybody else to say, let's get here, do these simple things, benchmark where you are, jump on this stuff, figure out where your hotspots are. This is what we did. This is what worked. This is what didn't work. Bring everybody along, right? This is not we're not going to save the planet as a business. You're not going to save the planet. We're not. It's a whole industry-wide problem.
Yeah, it's a global. I would say it's greater than industry. It is a look. Human beings, we build things, we repurpose things, we whatever. It's a materials, it's a supply chain, it's a labor. Like all of these things. As you're thinking about it, one, I love the idea that we were talking about ethical capitalism. I without diving into the various forms of government, but ethical capitalism, when you see examples of that working well, I think it leads to human flourishing. When you're having one of the things that challenging critical infrastructure, I don't know if it's all critical infrastructure, but certainly in data centers, it's not just the scale and we're the type of operator, we build big campuses.
Yeah.
We're as much into urban planning now as we are into
Yeah.
commissioning and maintaining data centers. But it's the speed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of acceleration, and so that has implications for safety. It's got a lot of implications. And we're big, when we talk about existing infrastructure in our business, I'm sure you're familiar with the term. It's brownfield, so an existing infrastructure, as opposed to greenfield, making it new, pad up, dirt up, new. If I'm trying to do speed, I can many times reuse a brownfield, but it might be in a state that I can make it doable for a data center, but it's not necessarily. In other words, to unwind the glued parts or whatever we want to call it, to unwind to convert it from a bunch of toothpicks glued together into Legos that I can repurpose 10, 20, 30 years. We expect, and I think I surprised you when I told you this a while ago, we expect these data centers to get 100, 200 years. I know we talk about 10, 20-year life cycles. That's what we expect. We're using a building that was built in the 50s. We're using a number of them, and they were built as 200-year buildings.
Yeah.
So we'll probably have a new roof. It will have new, different materials. But how do you balance that, that need for speed? And I don't mean for profit. What I mean, in other words, look, if you don't do this deal, we're going to go do somebody else. I don't mean that. I mean when the Department of Energy shows up and says, I need to get 15 campuses or 20 campuses. I need 20 steel plants up. I need these other things because we're reshoring this stuff. Regardless of who administrations are or whatever, I need this now. And the faster way is the less elegant. And we believe this is imperative. How do you help us strike the balance?
Yeah, that is a really hard question to answer, right? I think it's one, set the expectation, right? We're not talking about what always comes to my mind is some kind of like flipping, a flipper where you're like just going in and it's some paint and some drywall and you're kind of refabbing. That's not what we're talking about. It's kind of like what we did with our campuses. The value in the building is the site it's on, the foundation, the steel, the structure, right? Mm-hmm. Like you can reclad a building very easily. Like you can dissect and pull that building apart down to the bones of the building. And that's where there's a lot of embodied carbon is there, the steel and the concrete. That's always what we're talking about. The kind of main offenders in there, save all that and then reclad, right? And that's kind of how we look at like a deep energy retrofit project. The biggest part and where our business is always focuses the envelope, right? A really high efficiency, useful, functioning envelope is where so much. And for data centers, there's kind of way oversimplifying here, but it's the shell, the core of the building, just protecting all that technology and that infrastructure that's sitting in the core of it, right? So if we can make and repurpose and efficiently, quickly build or rebuild the shell of the building, you guys can go in there and repurpose and put all of that technology to work and build it inside, right? And I think that's kind of if we can strike a balance somewhere in there, that's fascinating. I was surprised. Probably maybe 2 years ago, I really hit me with this. You guys are talking about speed, and this mission critical idea of you got to build 15 data centers or build 2 campuses of X. This 12-month, roughly give or take, is this kind of window. Can I stand a building up operational in 12 months? That's an incredible construction cycle.
Assuming the pad is ready.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you kind of say, okay, go. Right. You've got 12 months. This thing needs to be powered on, right? Right. That's a crazy number, and I think it's doable. But it was again another paradigm shift. Those aren't typical construction timelines. What is the interesting is it triggered this knock-on effect, and we looked at it as we had customers come to us and say, we can't do this in 12 months with our typical methods of just tilt and precast concrete, right? It's just physically not possible. You've got weather conditions. You've got all the things that go into that. You can't build that building out of concrete, which is what we're super used to doing. That's our methodology. And the client said, find solutions. We need to be innovative. We need to look outside the boundaries of standing up a building like we have and say, how do I do this in 12 months? We don't sacrifice anything else. In fact, we want benefits rather than sacrifice. And the industry starts to innovate and opportunities come around and design teams and owners start to say, well, yeah, what's this building look like, right? And we've had a real big influence on that conversion idea of different methodologies, different, enclosing the envelope differently with different materials. It's speed to build. It's the cost to build that building just as fast, right? And then it's all the environmental savings. Like we don't want to, we talked about the regrettable substitution idea, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to make a good decision here that has this really bad, negative impact on the other side of the ledger.
Yeah. I didn't understand exactly what you meant before when I first heard you talk about that, which I thought was, I love that phrase. I love a good turn of phrase. Regrettable substitution. One of my daughters was telling me the other day, some friends of hers recently bought a home in one of these, a new neighborhood near us. I'm in a 40-year-old small house, which I'm paying. I've just about paid off for the second time. Yay me. But she was telling me about her friend in this house. Seemed very affordable. She got in. And 18 months in, began the materials like in the wall and in the attic. Not only, it wasn't just that it was falling apart. There was seals that weren't done correctly. So now there's a mold issue. When it was, one of the conversations was, hey, look, when I go, like I've had to replace furnaces and ACs and whatever in my home. But they didn't understand when they got this neighborhood, and I'm not trying to pick on fast-built neighborhoods, but it was the kind of neighborhood, as I understand it, I'm getting this anecdotal information, but it was, she finds herself now in a 15-year loan or 20-year loan in a home that is to replace the existing infrastructure is so hard. It's not like at my house where I just pop out that compressor, pop in the new compressor or the new furnace. They have to redo a wall. They have to do these things because they just sort of stapled things in. And it's like, who welds that together? Like attaching your axle of your car to the body of the car. Like you don't do that. You do these in these component ways. And again, I don't want to yet dive into the component idea. I want to tease that out with more. But it was, that's what your regrettable substitution reminded me of. It's not just the manner in which we go, it's the things that we're putting in there. And if we don't have a way, we might find ourselves in a bigger quandary than we started with.
Yeah, no, you're right on. It's there's a couple more things I think that can be used in that. And the way we look at it is embodied carbon obviously is you can look at one product A, you can look at concrete or tilt or precast and panels, insulated panels and things like that, is saying, okay, these are building typologies. This is different facade structures, right? And the embodied carbon of those different systems. So if you just look from a product or a design level, within that, you say, okay, I'm going to pick one of those systems. You're going to pick the panel system. Then it's what it's made with, right? Foam and the insulation and the ingredients of those insulation. There could be forever chemicals. There can be things that don't need to be in there, right? The steel, if it's really high intensity carbon steel, it may be cheaper, it may not, right? It may be offshored, it may be onshored, but all of those things looked at. So it's almost the ingredients that go into products. I think it definitely, to your point of this 20-year versus 100-year idea, I'm fascinated when you look at a whole building life cycle assessment of it's got really low embodied carbon in day one, but there's, let's say it's a 100-year cycle, you have to replace it 10 times versus one product that had a higher intensity day one, but there is no replacement cycle. It's one product for 100 years. 10 cycles times the lower. At the end of that whole vision, that whole beast, you made a bad decision up front. There's labor and cost and replacement and downtime and maintenance. I feel like the one person that's always not part of these conversations is the O&M. The operation and maintenance of buildings is never at the table, right? And that costs you guys money to run those buildings.
Right.
How much it costs to operate, and I'm not just talking energy. Energy is a big part of it. It's the single biggest in data centers. But what it costs to operate and maintain that building over its life cycle is really important. How funny is it that we build these incredibly complex technical buildings, And at the end of the day, for a contractor, so the architect, contractor, we just hand you the keys and you walk away, right? It's like, here, just run this thing. Just walk in, put your stuff in there and run this building.
Right.
It seems like there should be a little more of a...
Well, there's two things come to mind. Like, it's definitely it's a learning curve. One of the things I learned, I had Alec Kelly on the podcast a few times. She drives an electric vehicle. She loves electric vehicles, all four of them. I don't own one. I love the idea of just being able to plug it in. So, but here's an unintended consequence. According to her, the single biggest pollutant in our landfills is tires.
Yeah.
E-vehicles
Use a lot of tires.
chew up a lot of tires. Now, second, third, fifth, eighth generation will get much better. But one of the initial solutions to that was they made tires that lasted a lot longer.
Yeah.
The problem was they were 2 to 3 times more expensive.
And
when you go into a landfill,
Yeah.
they last 2 or 3 times longer in the landfill.
Yeah.
And so if the goal of an e-vehicle is to at least help our environment in some way, and there are varieties that it's talked about, this feels counterintuitive. And so her point was she's not anti-e-vehicles. It was sort of the government mandating something with the market still developing and evolving so that we don't mass produce a compounding challenge.
Yeah.
She also talked about fires and other things. But anyway, it was an interesting thing. I'm not an expert in it. The other is, well, let's just start there. So if you, as you run into, like, I wonder what that balance is between innovation, figuring out as we go so that when we land on a design, it makes a lot of sense, as opposed to let's just change it all now. And we have maybe it's not an unfortunate or regrettable material challenge. It's a regrettable production line or whatever.
Yeah. So there's an interesting thing here, because I said that I used the terminology of like a climate challenge or we have a crisis or a problem with the climate. It's actually a climate opportunity, right? And just like I think you said there, the idea of this circular economy in the construct that we've been working in, it's the take, make, waste model, right? And the circular economy is you reuse these materials, you repurpose them. The value, I was just having this conversation with someone, that the value of what goes in those materials has so much captured value that you want it back at the end of its useful cycle, right? Like, you don't want to go and harvest more material out of raw material. You want that back, right? So there has to be something shifting there. The landfill thing is a problem by region, right? And it's so cheap to put stuff in a landfill in the U.S., just in our markets.
Sure.
It costs next to nothing comparatively to other countries. In the UK and things like that, it's extremely expensive. So they're solving this waste to landfill problem. In the U.S., we're not there yet, right? People are like, just put it in the dumpster, right? And I'll pay the 1 ton, whatever it cost me a ton to load that thing and get it out of here. You raise the question that we should be asking is, how do we, if there's not an off-taker now for the tires or for whatever it is, how do we make one? Where's the opportunity for another business or another part of a supply chain to spin up and make something that was never there?
Yeah.
Right? Like, someone has, and that's where I think innovation is genius, where people say, there's a waste stream. This is where getting outside of your comfort zone, we all go to conferences and it's all construction or it's all data centers, it's all something. You have to go, I'm actually going to Circularity next week in Denver, and I go there with the single biggest intention of, I want to talk to people that are not in my circle. I don't want to talk to anyone in construction.
How ironic is that? You're going to Circularity to not talk about people in your circle.
Exactly. Yeah. It's how is somebody in food and bev or hospitality or something just that I wouldn't cross paths with and saying, I've got a waste problem here. I've got a problem in packaging or logistics, right? Or renewable fuels or something like that. And like, maybe that someone else has solved that. Maybe like there's a lot more. We were talking about this when we walked in. We need more intersection of those face-to-face conversations of, what are you challenged with? What's your problem? If you get enough people stating something, I've got an opportunity that I can't solve, someone else can say, I've got a use for that. I have a need for that. Your waste stream is my opportunity input material.
Yeah.
Right? Like, That's the facility, those conversations that we need to spin up more to solve some of these. And there's a huge opportunity for business. You could build a business, build a supply chain, build a whole ecosystem that wasn't there because of a problem that you can solve and monetize. Back to the capitalism side, right? Like, I'm not looking for government intervention and free anything. It's how do we bring that to market?
Yeah. Well, we are looking for, I am looking for government partnership in the same way that we built out interstates and intrastates that facilitated transportation and communication and manufacturing and all these things after World War II. We put soldiers to work. We built these things out. By the way, one of the things that Ali said that they're looking at doing, and they've already done in some experiments, is they're taking these tires, they grind them up, and they use them to help pave roads.
Yeah.
Roads are quieter. They have more grip. They're longer lasting. And so that her, if I remember correctly, it was, I just don't want an artificial acceleration when the innovation isn't ready yet. We'll blow every transformer. If we go and do this right now and everybody puts a fast charger in their house, we'll blow every transformer in any neighborhood that's not been built in the last 10 years. Like, these are the challenges. There's no fire department that can put out the batteries in these things right now. So it's not a no. We're early. Let's be early adopters. One of the things that we run into, and you might run into this regularly as well, when I'm designing a requirement, when I say I don't mean me, the data center operator, our customers. They're bringing to us I got a product that I need to put in the marketplace. It's going to move some electrons. It's going to, I need you to put some molecules to cool it. And then once it does that, it's got packets of information, and those packets are going to either go to other computers here on this campus because they're training some AI, or they're going to go to help the sheriff's 911 system or this MRI image or whatever they're doing. Modern economy, modern life. And so the people that are, somebody's brought a business problem to them and they've created a technical solution. Many times, and this is no shade at them, they're not thinking about 2030 or 2035 goals necessarily in terms of reusability or repurposing or whatever, in terms of the envelope. They regularly, because I come from the IT world, will think about it. When I have to replace that storage array, how am I going to do that? How do I do this? Modularity. When I have to replace my network infrastructure, because I for sure am going to. When I have to replace my compute infrastructure, I for sure am going to. But the envelope that surrounds it, whether it's the power, the energy, the mechanical, the cooling, the material that literally physically secure it or cover it, whether from the elements or other people or whatever, the requirement is a barrier to entry, a barrier to elements. It's not necessarily when I need you to repurpose a space in 10 years or 15 years. How are you going to figure out how to do that wall or the gate or the fence or whatever? And so, but when I get back to the boardroom for these organizations, and I don't care if it's one of the big hyperscale, top 5 or 8, or a Fortune 2000 insurance company, the other part of their organization, this isn't just a marketing slick. This is part of our culture. It is part of our thing. And so we have these, and as an operator, I'm trying to design, build, operate, and maintain something, but I've also got to solve that problem. So this is the conundrum. I don't mean it like we bail on it. And I know you know this, but like, how do we innovate while we're solving at speed and scale? And by the way, you and I, thank God, but we're also at unprecedented time. Like maybe fire, maybe dinosaurs watching a rock fall out of the sky. Like these are big events that are happening that, at least on par with kerosene and the railroad and whatever. These are big times. So we have all of these moving pieces. How do you help us navigate the communication between these groups? But anyway, I'll just leave it at that.
You hit me with this question a little bit when I was on stage, right? You came here like in so many words, it was the the last thing anyone wants to hear is, oh, I got a new product. I've got this new thing.
Right.
And you're like, yeah, I'm pretty risk averse. I need
Right.
stuff that I know
Right.
that I know works. And my comment back was that we as businesses, as a large supplier, as a large business, is we are not going to put something out into a space and say, I'm going to use this on your building. And somebody just cooked it up in the back room and said, oh, go try this, right? I mean, there's years and years and years of innovation and testing and all kinds of, the innovation cycle never stops. I feel confident that a lot of companies are really in these innovation cycles. And it's hard because I don't know if you see all that, right? I mean, a couple of years ago, we built a whole innovation center out. We're based in Ireland, and we have an innovation center that we launched, and we love to bring customers there because they don't see that back end stuff. And when they do, they're like, this is incredible. What this never ends. I mean, we're always, and like anything, it's 99% failure and 1% success, right? You just keep trying until you find, and we have lots of projects that don't have solutions. We know what the problem and the challenge is, and we don't have a technical solution to get over it. And suddenly they happen, right? There's these glimpses of innovation, things that come through. Sometimes it's on us. Sometimes we have to wait on our suppliers. For years, we've been talking about bio-based input materials and moving away from petroleum-based materials. That's starting to come. I remember asking our suppliers 5 or 6 years ago about that. And they're like, that's 10 years away. We don't even have anything to talk about. You keep asking, and then we might have maybe 5 years. We're working on something. There might be a solution there. All of a sudden, they're coming back to you and saying, you guys still interested in this? We have something to talk about. We have something to test. We're working. We've had some success. So always you asking us, there's this whole linear back and forth of everybody pushing and wanting more, and that innovation, that R&D culture, that innovative culture, I think has to be really pronounced because it does take time. I remember there was a whole, maybe 10 years ago in the construction space, there was this whole move towards transparency, right? Telling us what products are made with and how they're made and things like that. Just the simple ask was made for a lot of designers. And it wasn't really well received in the construction and on the manufacturers. Like, why would we tell you anything, right? And it was more of you're kind of stunned with it at first. And then there's this push and pull of, okay, well, why and how? And, common ground is found and we move through that stuff. But it's kind of a shock and then take it back and figure it out and think through it and then come back and say, well, does this work? And how do we get past that? It's always like that with products. I think there's a really interesting – I'll also say this. I feel like I've seen a significant change in the communication. So coming from the architectural world, my first experience out of college was being behind a desk and managing a project or working on stuff, and manufacturer reps ringing you and emailing you, can I come in the office? I'll bring you donuts. Can you see? They're selling you stuff, and you're like, I don't have time for this. I got drawings to do. I got to finish this. That still exists to some level, but I think there's a lot more collaboration between owners and buildings saying, can you help us? Right? We don't have a solution. We don't have a way to do this. Back to the idea of that 12-month construction window. I really think because those barriers have been there and they haven't been broken down, people are more open to say, hey, could you help us figure this out? Could we partner or could we pilot and test and innovate together? That's fantastic. Yeah. There should be more of that, right? It's not just about these siloed. The construction industry is so siloed. I mean, it's incredible that I don't know how we build buildings sometimes because so many people are involved that don't talk to each other along all those stages. And yet we build these unbelievably technical and complex buildings. That has to be broken down, right? I mean, there really does. If you need something in your space and you say that doesn't exist, we've exhausted resources, go out in the market and say, who is willing to change? Who wants to change? Who wants to drive that? And again, you may pick one or two partners, but they'll drag the rest of the industry along, right? You'll get a winner, somebody innovates, somebody captures a bunch of market, and then the rest of the market says, we have to change. We have to change because now that's where the industry is going. It drags it's the early adopters, the middle of the curve, and the last ones to come. Right. The last ones to come will get dragged, or they they're out.
die.
They're the dinosaurs, right?
Right.
They just phase out. I still feel like the construction industry is a lot like that, and there's more people moving to the innovation side. The questions are being asked, the communication and the that community piece of solving big problems is getting much better.
Yeah. One of the ways that we found successful, first of all, it's not just the products. Because we've got to sit at the feet of a lot of these very large, very sophisticated organizations. Look, many, if not all of the organizations, certainly of the Fortune 50, if they could do it themselves, they would do it themselves.
Yeah.
Like if they could predict where they need to be and when they need to be and do it, they take care of the easy things. They give us the hard things. Like that's just the way it is, and we don't mind. Like we do hard things. It's what we do. But it's given us an opportunity now that for some of them we've been with them 15 years or more.
Yeah.
But we get to sit in those conversations where they'll bring us they're not bringing us an envelope problem. Like that's not the kind of thing. They would say, I have a workload that I need to deploy. Some of them are latency sensitive. Some of them serve a geographic region for data sovereignty rules or whatever it is. But I have a workload that I need to get things done. And we imagine that we're going to solve it like this. The opportunity for us is, and we get to do it all the time. And I'm so grateful we come because the company, while we bought a data center right up the street from us in Swanee, 300,000 square feet back in 2005, which was a monster data center by 2005 terms. But our emphasis was on managed IT services. We manage your server, your backup, your network, your disaster recovery. We got into the cloud business. We'd build a dedicated cloud for you, whatever, all of those things. But it was a white glove service.
Yeah.
When over time, because the big public clouds became public clouds and went to production and
Cost and market is so
all
cheap
those things, we were
and-
like, look, there's not a future for us here. But that's our DNA, is that service-minded. And most of the people that were in the non-service data center space come out of either just telecom, no shade at telecom, but a shell, or they came out of real estate. One of those two things. And those were not high touch, not as an industry. And so when we brought sort of this service-minded attitude to the business and we began intersecting with these customers, we got a lot of traction.
Yeah.
And then what it did, because we delivered on it, we got to sit at their feet and listen. And so as people come to us and say, hey, I got a better way to fill in the blank, we're getting a lot of calls and a lot of conversations as well. It's interesting, depending upon what part of the country. In some parts of the country, here in the South, they bring you donuts. Out West, it's carrots and lychee nuts. I don't know what's going on. For me, they bring me a protein shake. I don't know if they're trying to say something about I'm the world's largest Lego or whatever, but I digress. But my point is that as we've gotten better at communication, not just let me show you a reliability chart on this wall's going to last forever, or this roof's going to like here's the things, or it's interoperability or whatever. When we've added to that conversation, and this helps the marketing department at your organization because it is satisfying in a real measurable way other parts of your business that whether they've made a declaration or it's tied to your culture or whatever, when you're able to bring the physical performance of whatever it is and connect, and I don't mean in an artificial way, I mean in a real way, these things. So what we've had to do is get really much better at the communication piece, not just at the engineering piece.
There's two things that I think come off on all of that. One is we went through a really interesting innovation cycle by force, right? There's a business in the raised access floor, right? For years and years and years, very successful, probably the dominant in that space. And the whole data center market pivoted. You guys went from access floors, raised access floors in data centers to a completely different design. Well, what does that look like? The business is like, our whole model just shifted. right? And that R&D, that innovation said, let's ask our customers, why did you shift? What caused the change? What that did was open the door for, well, we're heating and cooling the servers and the racks and the whole systems differently. And this is now what we're looking at. The light bulb is, we can do that. We can make a completely different product and still service you in a different way, because the access floor is to cool underneath, blow the air, all that kind of stuff. Old technology to today's standard. Now, basically, these hot aisle containment designs, that whole business pivoted to something that didn't exist, that's now servicing the innovation that the industry brought to us, right? And they've completely changed the model and now do that and these custom designs for all the major kind of players in the space. It's fascinating, right? You pulled the rug and said, where did it go? No, I've got ended up with a much better solution on the other end, which is kind of an interesting piece. And it's funny because the original design was very modular, right? It's like Lego. You could snap the whole thing together, take it all out, replace it, reuse it, repurpose it.
You're talking about the raised floor.
The flooring, yeah, right? Yeah. The other part of that is, in terms of materials and this modular idea, is I've had some interesting conversations too, and things I never really thought about, which is resilience, right? As we see buildings being devastated by natural disaster and forest fires and hurricanes where we live, instead of demoing and having to destroy a whole building, only a section was damaged. You can basically take that part out, take the damage away, and rebuild and, kind of fix the building, right? We have this demo idea where that doesn't really need to be done. That in itself, think of how much faster you can get. Think it's a hospital or a data center in terms of downtime. You've said, how long would it take to demo and rebuild the building versus, hold on, we could do something in weeks or a month or 2 months versus 12 to 15 or 16 months or something like that. I think that's an opportunity, right? As we're all dealing with this resilience factor and climate change and the things that are happening, but also that adaptability piece. I mean, there really is the expansion idea of buildings growing in scale, shrinking in scale. All of that is really an interesting component. It does change the real estate model quite a bit, right? And we've toyed around and thought about these ideas of leasing products and, kind of this almost like, hey, put it in the market and take it back. Something interesting came out of that was.
What do you mean? Like you would lease
like a facade, right, or a skin of a building and things like that. And we're like, well, what does that look like in the space? There's an inherent challenge which kind of no one ever thought of, is you finance buildings and insure buildings because you own them.
Right.
Like leasing works in cars, and that whole industry works totally fine that way.
Bill Gates did it with at OS. Remember, like before you bought the entire thing until he came along and said, "I'll license you."
It. But in buildings, you couldn't finance a building or insure a building if, like, well, wait a second, you don't own the building. You're just like the whole envelope of the building, or there's whole parts of this building that you don't own.
Right.
It really turns that model upside down. And again, adaptability, it could happen, right? Like they could adapt to that. But there's those paradigm shifts that happen where you get really old models in markets that are just, everybody knows exactly how it works. You start changing the pieces around, people get really nervous. Yeah.
Well, one of the cool things that's happened in the last 5 or 10 years, and it's not equally it's not applying equally in the construction business. But here, at least from the data center operations, before, when you built a data center, you commissioned the whole thing. Yeah. It's like building an aircraft carrier. You didn't commission a third of it, you commissioned the whole thing, put it to sea trial, whatever, and then it was done. Now we can incrementally commission. So I can build a third of it, the first third of data halls. I don't have to deploy and strand possibly all the capital for the power or the cooling or all those other things. But that was not the case for the longest time. Yeah. So that is an area that's adopted. Another is you would never have a multi-story building, ever. Yeah. It just didn't happen. You'd put no mechanical infrastructure on the roof. You're telling me I've got roof perforations and water or refrigerant or whatever on the roof? Absolutely not. Yeah. Move it along. And that's all changed. Yeah. And so I do believe, and I'm seeing more and more, not just an interest, but an adoption of, they're almost like these cells, like these, modular is a word that's used a lot and can be applied in a variety of ways, but that I have these segments, almost like you have in a boat, where I can make them watertight or whatever, repair them. But there is a more and more a willingness to say, well, how could we do it?
Yeah.
Well, and by the way, the things that we're deploying in 24 or 36 months, or the things that we're deploying now, are the things that were sold 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And so if you have some of these ideas, whether it's in the tools to operate or the design or material best practices, people are willing to listen. And more of our customers, that audience has gone through a renovation themselves. And so they are willing more and more to listen. So depending upon the impact to speed, to scale, to cost.
Yeah, no, this is, I'll put this out as kind of an open call, right? We love the opportunity. We've had the chance to do this over, the past several years now of optimizing and rethinking what a data center looks like and how it's built and what it's built with, right? Mm-hmm. From mass timber, right? Instead of using concrete and using structural steel, what if we built it out of mass timber, right? Changing the whole dynamic. I mean, to your point, who would have thought you were building a data center out of a mass timber frame, just a few years ago? We have seen, if I look back at all the probably drawings and designs we've seen of data centers over the last 5 or 6 or 7 years, they're constantly changing. You guys are always looking to optimize and get everything out of how does it cool, how is it powered, how is the construction methods, the build speeds, the way the physical IT and hardware goes in and how much hardware. So this is a very living ecosystem, right? I don't think anyone's out there building a data center today like they built 10 years ago for sure.
Yeah.
5 years ago, I don't think so, right? And we see drawings coming to your point of, hey, this is teed up in the next 24 months. It's yet another revision. And with the volume and the growth in this industry over the next 5 to 10 years, planning what is coming in 5 or 10 years, it's a challenge, right? Like it's really hard to know what will we be building in 5 years, right? And you kind of have to make some of those decisions
Here's
now.
an illustration of that. You were talking about raised floor a little while ago. A lot of our data centers are 36 to 48-inch raised floors. In fact, I'm not going to tease. I was giving a tour, and I'm not going to tease this person who might have been cough from Clemson, but wherever, who knows, was in an SEC team, and we're walking along, and they said, how high is your raised floor? And why that's important for people who aren't data center people is you build a cold air plenum underneath the raised floor. So as the computers are sitting in a server, they draw up through perforated tiles that sit right in front of them, cold air that comes up, computer fans pull them across, cools down the infrastructure, comes out the back, and it goes to a plenum above the data center that's hot, and that goes to the cooling infrastructure, and it repeats the cycle. Now, when you're running 10 kW, maybe even 15 or 18 kW a rack, that's a very doable, affordable. And for the longest time, especially for our architects, they loved us because we keep trying to work complexity out of design. Yeah. Well, now that we're talking in some instances about these workloads that are GPUs or they're super intensive, whatever they are, these super nodes that aren't just hot, but the level of complexity, the engineering needed, not just for the compute, but for the network, for the cooling or whatever. And so they started removing the raised floor and just putting it on the slab, one, for they don't need that cold air in theory. And two, they don't, the weight. I just want to put it down on this concrete or material, whatever I'm using. I don't want to put it on this raised floor. And so we're like, okay, that's where we're going. Here it is. Until just recently it was, well, we need both. Because we will have some data halls, maybe even not a portion of a data hall, but some part of the data hall might just be CPUs. Like there are more and more CPUs that are coming out that are 300-400% more powerful than they were, but still at a fraction of the energy. Yeah. And they're very affordable, and there's multiple suppliers. And then these nodes, maybe even the whole hall, maybe in a building today as GPUs, but who knows what it's like going to be in 3 to 5 years. Yeah. So I need you to have the ability to do air assist, liquid cooled,
Everything.
immersion, back of the rack, like there's a lot. And so on the one hand, and by the way, it's one of the things the point you were making earlier, a lot of data centers before were sort of bespoke. They were, if not completely one-off, there's a lot of one-off in there. One of the biggest areas of innovation, at least in my personal world, in my organization, is our sophistication around logistics.
Yeah.
The ability to receive something into our facility and get it to where it needs to be safely, easily, and operating without disturbing a production environment. And while we're talking about buildings that may be, like these leases are 15 to 20 years, you're talking about a building that we hope is there at least 100 or more. The environment in it is going to change a gazillion times. You still got your fingers, but the cells in your body, for some people, I'm not going to pick on Alabama fans, but for the rest of us, right, the cells regenerate so often. And so the environment inside, and so so we've had to get sophisticated around logistics.
Yeah, we've had some interesting conversations. I've had some interesting conversations around this modular idea where, hey, I've got to just pick a number. 20 data centers have to be built, right? And they're all going to be the same.
Right.
How can I take, in theory, this modular design where it's cookie cutters? I've got to put 5 here, and I've got to put 10 here, and I've got to put 5 in 3 different states, 3 different completely regions and climates. How do we make it so it's just this, drop, monopoly houses where you get, ideally, in theory, that could possibly work, but realistically, structural, snow loads, wind loads, codes, like the design isn't. You can't do it 100%, but it is an interesting concept. So that again has moved to the design of prefab engineering steel with the optimal solution there is an insulated panel on the outside. So you have this kind of kit of parts, which really adds some interesting components to it because you have 100% offsite manufacturing. Everything is delivered like a kit of parts and assembled with very close tolerances and all those things with build speed and all those controlled factors. That seems to be a lot of the way the industry is going versus this.
Very attractive.
It is, right? And we were just joking about is this, we've built things in this archaic way of just pouring concrete and tilting walls and all this kind of stuff where there's a little bit of magic, a little bit of science to get it to all work right. You've got constraints on weather and constraints on job site changes and things like that. It's a very structured, it's not adaptable. If a change made in the field, that is not adaptable, right? So I do see a drastic change in that type of direction. Again, it's how fast can I deploy X number of buildings or X number of units for different sites. I think there's a lot, I think there'll be a lot of optimization cycles in that design road, right? Of how far that goes down, of from roof types to how many stories to all of it, right? It's prime for this is what we're designing today. What does that look like in 5 years, right? It's prototype A and B now. We may run out of letters in 10 years because we've gone through so many prototypes that just keep getting better and better and eliminating how much steel we're using. The steel goes away and suddenly we're doing modular mass timber, right? Like there's a lot to tease out there.
Yeah. Well, we have in our organization, we have a thing called the Freedom Design. We actually have 4 versions of the Freedom Design. And I don't know that we've ever deployed one that is 100% the way it is on paper because you make a design. We're not making a car. And but when it goes, there might be a different snow load. There might be a different, whatever it is. Yeah. And so, but because we have a standardized, I'm not rebuilding every time. Yeah. I am adjusting. And there's a lot of attraction to the kit of parts idea. We love it. I love the idea of especially when you have the digital twin and you're able to not just see how it could in production work, but if while I'm deploying, I need something strengthened or I need it elongated or whatever, I can tell the manufacturing assembly line. Yeah. And it can do it. And I don't have to store all those extra parts on site. Like all of these things are super attractive. But here's the challenge. This is it's the inevitable thing. And I love these kinds of conversations. But when I bought my house, it was not a bespoke house, but it wasn't like a cookie cutter like they are now. And but they had this thing. They changed two materials: the siding and the plumbing that came from the street in. And old people like me, when they hear what I'm about to say, are going to flinch. The plumbing from the street in was this thing called blue poly. And I forget what, I'm not going to misname. I think I remember what the siding is, but it wasn't concrete and it wasn't regular old siding. The company that put the siding on was sued, eventually went bankrupt because it was so, it looked like it was great, looked like it had gone through its robust testing. Yeah. But there was a speed and growth at that time when they built these homes, and it just crumbled. And I've replaced 99% of it with concrete siding.
Like hardier, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. I don't think it's hardy plank because that was the original, right? That's like saying Kleenex.
Yeah, sorry.
But it's so cool, but we've got concrete siding around pretty much the entire house. That blue poly that came from the meter it came into the crawl space of my house. One day, my probably then 5 or 6-year-old came upstairs and said, "Papa, the floor is wet."
Oh, cracked, broke, leaking.
It filled my crawl space. So on the one hand, yay, my foundation is watertight. Filled it 3 feet, then came through the access door and did 2 or 3 inches across the floor of we're in a split level house. And so had to replace it and wherever else it showed up with copper.
Yep.
So this old traditional copper. We didn't even do
flex or PEX.
Yeah, we didn't do because that wasn't available then. And so there's that. We all have these stories of, back to your point about regrettable substitutions. What looked like it had been well tested, wasn't well tested in all circumstances. So when you sit across the table from organizations like ours and you persuade them before you ever get to a product to think like this, and they're just moving through their risk mitigation and whatever, how do you capture their imagination?
Yeah, no, it's that is the fundamental challenge we have in the industry, right? And I'll pick up where you left off there. It's cost, right? You know exactly what it takes at that concrete down to a half a penny, right? I mean, it is worked and optimized to the third decimal, right? And that, I think, is also some of the problems you have where change comes in a project. He says, "Hey, we've got a better design," and then at 4:00 on a Friday, somebody sends an email from the contractor, the GC, and to the architect, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, okay, that looks good. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's going to save us $40,000. Approved, right?" And you have no idea what the knock-on effect of that decision was. When 6 months of research and evaluation went on, and suddenly you're regretting back to what probably was used before, or something like that. Those scenarios happen all the time. So there is disruption, right? And we're all risk averse to change. I mean, just human nature, we don't like change. We know what we're comfortable with. The roofing industry is the same way. Roofing has been done forever the same way, right? Again, ripe for disruption. There's a lot of flaws and a lot of efficiency there. I kind of lean on, there's a few things. I think there's the ethical connection with the company, right? If your business and my business align with what we do and how we operate, I think at a top level, at a corporate level, there's alignment, right? We're running our business in a way that when you ask the question on stage of what sustainability means, that's kind of where my head went. It's like somebody made the joke of, would anybody want to be in a sustainable marriage? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't sound like a lot of fun either. Is how can we grow and operate in a way that is positive and regenerative and doing less damage, because we have done a lot of damage along the way, right? I think we start to now realize where those errors and hotspots are. So that's where my head goes. I also think embracing digital technology. The architect I worked for coming out of college, unbelievably talented, really good drawer, amazing with pen and ink. He could not use a computer for anything other than drawing, email at that point, right? We'd never even tried to get him on, the digital side of it. But the way we now embrace technology and Revit and digital twins and everything, 360, everything, right? And the way that the construction sector will start to move through and track construction process, 5D, full through. I really didn't understand how complicated data centers were until I really got into the space. You kind of broad brush. It's a big square box. You make sure it's watertight. You have to get rid of a lot of heat. You got to cool everything in there really, really well, as efficient as you can, and you just stuff it full of technology, right? Like that's probably the majority of what people think is in a data center.
Right.
Clearly, that's not how it works.
Right.
The tolerances that you guys have, and a wall being slightly out of alignment because everything is so tightly packed in there that I keep going back to are we 5 or 10 years away from taking an entire design digitally in a model and sending it out to the industry and everyone taking those digital models straight to production? Like you send me your envelope and it goes right to the factory and we start physically making those products from a digital model.
Yeah.
Are we there? Not right now.
Yeah.
I think we will.
Yeah.
And I think tolerances and modularity and all of those things start to really change, where you get unbelievable quality, unbelievably custom bespoke design, or 100% replication, right? Potentially. It says I can build 100 of these in 50 locations just like they are. That to me is efficiency and innovative ways that we can change. No waste. Right? Anything we do waste, we can recover and reuse. Speed is there. There's cost effectiveness in building that way. I mean, I think that's where I talked about disruption and the way the industry could be completely turned on its head. That's probably not going to happen in any major capacity anytime soon. There's going to be glimpses of disruption and things that are, wow, that could be a lot better, and someone takes it. But I think the technology and the digital side of how we move and build and transmit information and how we communicate information from as the owner to the designer to the contractor to those products being made to delivered to the site to construction to deconstruction to repurpose, like that we've come full cycle in the conversation too of like this circular idea. That to me is real disruption, and it's just it will take us a while to get there.
Yeah.
Right.
But even when we talk about waste, when we just talk about it from a thing of, this is wasteful and it's unethical, for well over a decade now, there's been a lot of concentration on this thing called e-waste. So that the systems within, much less mining rare earth materials or whatever, and the consequences of just sending off computers around the globe to somebody else's landfill that causes all these horrific, not just environmental, but to the people that are stripping them out and whatever. They're terrible things. And I don't mean just data centers, I just mean construction, period. What's the total cost of ownership of this thing?
Yeah.
From the time I start to the time, like when it's all done, it's at stabilization, and I run this house, I run this building, I run this data center for some period of time before I begin whatever it is. What's my real cost of this thing? And how do I iterate on it so I can get that under control? But the other part of it's going to be, what am I doing with this waste?
Yeah.
Whether it's cheap landfills or whatever, we're going to be accountable not just for the carbon, but for the waste. And to the degree that we can manage and monitor that, I think first it's a business advantage, and later it's going to be a liability.
You nailed it. That goes right back to what we talked about a little while ago. Is it shouldn't be waste. It should be value in the materials that we're producing. We're kind of in this world of extended. There's been iterations of extended producer responsibility. I make something, I'm responsible for it out into the market, and eventually, when it's end use or end phase, that producer is responsible for taking it back or doing something with it. Right. You've seen examples in batteries, right? Tesla is a good example. They want all that lithium back. They want those. I had a battery replaced in my car. Tesla took that battery back and they took everything out of it and repurposed all those rare earth valuable materials.
Right.
It's not landing it in landfills. I mean, they know how much value is inherently there. We don't look at the majority of the things we make that have that inherent value. It's there's definitely a scale that has to shift where, and we've seen it with PET is a great example. That's taking water bottles and recycling them. Our PET is now more costly than virgin PET because people want it. There's a demand. There's a supply and demand issue. Basic economics of that.
Right.
That I think is what starts to change some of those paradigms where things that we produce, we want all that material back. Steel is infinitely recyclable, right? I mean, there's no steel ends up in a landfill. I mean, that's just kind of an easy example, but we've done a ton of work of figuring out how can we take our foam, zero waste to landfill being a big target, one of our biggest challenges, and we started dealing with the factory level. What can we do with this waste, right? And finding partners and using materials and looking at that innovation. And we found a partnership actually in Atlanta here to do that and to use it and put it actually into concrete and add value, not as a filler, but add inherent value into the concrete itself. At the end of the life, my team and our whole business is looking at logistically, how do I get a product back, right? It's a big country, right? It's easier to solve this in tiny countries, but I put a product out in California, how do I get it? Where do I get it back to? You know, these kind of micro economies or microgrids of systems. How do I get the steel back? How do I get the foam back? Where do I repurpose it? Who takes it apart? Like the building has to come apart. Do they strip the steel off and the foam apart? They send those materials back to us. Who pays for it? We have to work through back to my example about getting our headquarters, getting materials. People are willing to pay up front saying, like, I'll deal with this. We're getting there. These things have to be built. These gaps have to be filled where someone's not there to solve that problem. Businesses have opportunities to stand up. Another really interesting project in San Francisco, SFO Airport. The design teams contacted us and said, hey, we understand that you would be willing to take this is a temporary building, right? It's going to be up for a year. While we're renovating and building the rest of the airport, we have this temporary structure being built. It's only going to last 12 to 14 months, and then we're taking it all down. What do we do with the materials? I was like, this is amazing. I've never had a phone call like this, right? Like those are the phone calls you want to get, right? Like major scale, big amount of material. Right. What was different about that versus some other kind of opportunities have come up was the owner, SFO, was saying, we have budgeted for the disassembly and the take back of those materials, not this a wish and a prayer, right? Of saying, yeah, we'll figure it out when we take it apart. They physically called us and says, what's it going to cost? How many trucks is it going to take to get back to your factory? Who's paying for the labor? How do we get the product off the building? And what do we do with it? When do we store it? Do we palletize it? It was a mind-blowing exercise because we've never done it.
Right.
We've talked about the idea, but this is like we're doing this on the project.
Right.
That's the kind of questions people need to ask and go through the exercise to learn what you don't know, what didn't work, right? What failed, what fell down. The fact that I'm calling our operations managers at the plant saying, how much is it going to take to get it from a truck from here to there? Like, what would we charge?
Right.
He's like, why are you asking this? And I was like, this is like we've got a real opportunity to do something different here. Those are the kind of things that I think are starting to happen at scale, right?
Yeah.
Like not this little kind of side project stuff, things that are really asking questions like that.
Right.
But we need more, right?
One of the cool things I think about you, Brent, is you're able to cast a vision. And so it's that evangelistic, like you can, because here, for example, when you're talking about SFO, and I'm imagining that, I can imagine you going to other airports or other organizations and saying, because you're going to have a when you do this, or going to these circularity events, or when you're going to adjacent, maybe not obvious, but adjacent things. And if you get an opportunity, whether you're on the vendor floor or on the stage, and say, just consider. Because if you're able to consider and find a way to do that, it may be that I don't want to ship those materials from California back to Florida. It defeats the purpose. Yeah, we didn't go to waste, but the carbon that we generated to do all of this. But what if I could warehouse it? Because there's airports in Utah and Nevada and all these other places. There's 13 in the LA area alone. Like to store it in a lot. It's doing no harm. We take it from SFO, we take it out to the high desert that's just desert. Yeah. We organize it, we inventory it, it's there, we park it. And then as it's needed, and it will be needed. And by the way, this is not the kind of stuff that's necessarily going to degrade greatly over time because of these things, and you can repurpose it. Like if we keep thinking about it, but if I'm able to plant the seed of imagine that you're able to, your neighbors, your kids, your state, we start off at the beginning, this is a political, but almost, I don't mean political in a negative way, but
attraction.
It's an attraction to, look, this is how we're going to be good stewards of these natural resources.
It's funny enough you said that because that's always been it's a space issue. Where do you store stuff like that? Mm-hmm. I have a colleague who went out, I believe she works for the city of San Francisco, and she was trying to solve that challenge. You know where she started to look? Under infrastructure, under major highways. What happens to that space?
Yeah.
Right? Like no one uses that space.
Yeah.
Her vision was, what if we took all of these underpasses and all this infrastructure that's really not habitable for anything and just made it storage? Right. It's a void it's empty space that could be filled with building
materials. It probably
materials.
has access up to the roads and
Absolutely.
whatever.
You have access into it. What if that became a storage field or facility all across the city for materials that are in between, being down, but they haven't found. That was another challenge with this take back program or this repurpose idea is how often are you going to say, oh, I've got a product here in Atlanta and oh, there's another building on the other side of Atlanta that needs that product right now.
Right.
Come on.
Not
right.
often.
That's not going to happen. Right. So there's this intermediate of downtime, of deconstruction to reconstruction. I mean, it's hard enough to get construction schedules, delivered materials on the right when you're building new.
Right.
To line two different schedules is tough. So there has to be a middle retaining area of some sort. And it was just a fascinating piece that I think outside the box thinking of where's space in an urban context that no one wants and no one uses, and the city owns it.
Right.
Right. It was really cool.
What I like about your going to adjacent things is if the people who build roads and overpasses or whatever are there and they could go back to their org and say, hey, here's how we can win the next bid. What if we built this 8 feet taller or 10 feet or whatever it is? Or what if we clear a space like this that's on strong bedrock when we do the next ring around the city or whatever it is? Like we're solving these things. But I can build, because we never thought about it, ready to go storage infrastructure, whether it's for repurposing facilities or whatever. Here's a way. And I'm going to design into my transportation infrastructure logical offsets for railhead or depots or bridge access and a methodology, clearances and the logistics to do that. Yeah. And they may not need it for 20 years. They may not need it for 50 years. But we know change is going to come. We know whether it's an elegant repurpose or it's a bring it down to the foundation or redo it. How can we in some way help to reclaim these things? I think that when you're able to get out there, like think about this, think about the opportunity. What are you for? And you go to these adjacent things. That is a way to sort of, ethically and in a way that leads to our personal flourishing and our neighbors flourishing, just to get them thinking a little bit different.
I love it. Yeah, that can you become a connector, right? I mean, someone's got to connect the dots. Yeah. There's a lot of these ideas that live in isolation and live in these little conversations, but if you're not trying to connect the people and the ideas to make it happen, it's nothing more than a glimpse or a flurry of light that never went anywhere.
Yeah. So what do you think? I'm almost reluctant to say 10 years, but some imaginary 5 or 10 years. What do you hope? But what do you think? Like, what do you think is realistic? Not just in the envelopes of facilities or whatever, but just in this bigger idea of how are we thinking about how we're building, what we're building. Oh, before you answer that, there's one other thing I wanted to say. This is where I think real change is going to happen, at least where I've seen it before. Are you familiar with the concept of PUE within data centers? Have you ever heard us talk about that? Yeah, PUE. So there's a concept called power utilization effectiveness. Okay. This, in its simplest form, it's inelegant, but there was nothing before it. And it's great. It was, I want a ratio when you have a facility, some of the power, let's say a megawatt of power is coming into a building. Some of that megawatt is actually doing the job. Like it's serving MRIs. It's streaming music, whatever it's doing. It's doing, but it's not going to be the whole megawatt. It's going to be a percentage of that megawatt. The rest of it is what we call it's the work needed. It's the cooling infrastructure. It's the life safety elements. It's all the stuff needed so that the work can get done. And originally, when we were repurposing brownfield buildings that never had efficiency of power and now water as a consideration, because we had an abundance of resources. You never consider something that you have an abundance of resources. Probably the original efficiency was what we call would be an efficiency of 3. And what that meant was for every 1 unit that's actually working and doing the job, I need 3 units to get that unit to do its job. Okay. Very inefficient.
Yeah.
Now, there are some places that can, supposedly get that to less than 1. I'll believe it when I see it, just when fusion is out there and we're, perpetual power. But like a 1.4, a 1.5. And so for every unit of 1, I have a 0.4 to a 0.5 of overhead.
Factor, yeah.
We're working our way to paradise, which is
parity.
Parity. Yeah. But on the way to paradise, we got to eat. And so we got a 0.4 or 0.5, pretty common for people that have really been concentrating it. That idea, it was introduced formally, I think, by Christian Bellotti out of Microsoft years ago. But people had talked about this idea, whether it was named PUE or whatever, but this need for efficiency, all these other things for decades. Nobody did it. What caused it to change was these customers, the bigger customers, the biggest buyers in the world said, it started off with, we're going to do a request for information. So we're not buying, we just want to know more about you. And what's your green story? Okay. And so in order to qualify, you'd have to have a story. Yeah. Then it became later it became, after a number of years, an RFP or an RFQ or RFP depending. Yep. And basically it was, you can't even bid. We won't even do business with you if you don't have a real story. I'm sorry, not even a story, a demonstratable, actionable methodology. Not a plan, not a vision.
Not a hope.
Not a hope. Hope's not a strategy. But I want to see what you're doing it.
I love it.
So if you're just raised floor, it's blanking panels, raised floor with air. Even if you're low efficiency, you're 2 or 3 or 4 kW a rack, we want to see what are you doing to, as simple as changing out your lighting, whatever. I want to see the methodology, and I want governance around it. When they began doing that some number of years ago, 2014 maybe, 2015, something like that, guess what everybody started doing? Coming up with a PUE plan. Yeah. And now a water utilization efficiency plan. And in the beginning, it was inelegant for everybody. When are you measuring? How are you measuring? Where are you measuring? How many? Like whatever. And it's still, it's broad, but it's much better than it was. What I think is going to affect change is when organizations show up and say, just like that PUE, I want to see the waste recovery methodology. I want to see the iteration over time as we, not just because they have this internal plan for their IT stuff. 100% guarantee you there's a plan for replacing racks, replacing systems, replacing network. Guarantee it. They're going to, at some point, impose upon organizations like mine, and this will be in everything. This will be in housing, whatever, it doesn't matter. What's the recovery plan? What's the adjustment or the iteration plan? And then what's the methodology with third-party governance? You know, when you go to buy a home, somebody comes and inspects it for you. They issue a report. You can't get a loan unless you have all of these things put together, clear title, all these other things. When that happens, and I don't know, because right now everybody's just trying to harvest.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on, but it's coming. I don't know when it is, but when that affects us in a material way, whether it's for themselves or it's operators like us that serve them. And so I think the advantage is to be an early adopter and innovator.
Yeah.
Start working on your plan now. So my question to you was not just what you, like maybe there's a hope, but what do you think is real in the next you choose period of time? No more than 10, no less than 5 years.
That's going to disrupt and keep accountability for
just what you see where we started this conversation in the construction business. You guys are addressing a piece of it, but we're talking about the whole thing. How do you think the construction business is going to adopt? Are you going to see more modularity? You're going to see materials changing? You're going to see off-site material manufacturing deployed to the site? What do you think is real?
I don't think, as much as I'm as an eternal optimist as possible, I don't realistically think there's only going to be one silver bullet. It sounds like you guys have something because you're very fixated on that kind of return.
We know
right?
our swim lane, and we know what we design. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've seen the modularity conversation been going on for a long time, and it's one of those slow burns. At some point, it's going to fully explode, and you'll get the hockey stick. Right?
Just like liquid cooling.
Exactly. Like you're going to see. I mean, I've seen how many cool ideas where you have a shell of an empty building that's 40 stories, and you have all these. The idea of like a shipping container that's been
they do it in
out.
material handling now.
Yeah.
It's already done.
I think modularity will have lots of iterations. I think there'll be a kit, a unit, a modular unit that gets deployed as something from a hospital room to an apartment to the kit of parts we talked about on the envelope side. I think that's one avenue. I think there is a digital transformation that we're really, and our business is very much looking, and we've actually have now digital teams that we've at a global scale and in individual businesses.
Did you just say you have avatars? Your team is digital?
No. They're real people.
You walk in a room, you're on the holodeck.
Holograms.
Yeah,
that's right.
Just holograms.
No, we have a team that focuses on a digital strategy, and what that looks like is very different from marketing to digital applications to, like we talked about, Revit and BIM and the 5D ideas and the whole digital twin idea. I think that has a lot of legs to be determined. To your point of how we quantify this, I can reflect a little bit about how our business is in terms of how we see a return on capital deployed, right? We've been at this from a sustainability and kind of the journey we've taken. This is kind of a second phase. We did a net zero energy journey back in what we finished in 2020, but it was really 2011 that our CEO said, hey, we're going down this path. We know it's coming. We know energy is a forever cost for our business and every other business like ours. How do we control it? How do we be better stewards? And then we went on this next 10-year journey, our kind of Planet Passionate journey and all those targets. I think there is a major shift of setting the targets, but really being accountable and showing kind of if we come up with one or two or three metrics that show how well you're generating a profit versus how efficiently you're doing it, or how your sustainability targets are returning capital or saving money for your business. I think that's an interesting concept that people can be. We've talked about ESG targets. We've CSRD, this Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. A lot of those things have come about, and I think it'll continue to flush out. Again, politics aside, things like that. I think it's part of the collective. It's part of the communication.
The
private sector is going to do what it's going to do. We know it's good business. We know transparency is good business to show how we run our businesses. I think there's some really interesting. You talked about it when we opened up about how you're kind of you incorporate a lot of different components in your business. This vertical integration, I'm fascinated by. I'll throw a name out there because they're no longer around, so I don't think we're going to hurt anyone's feelings. But do you remember Katerra? They were a wood fab, a pre-engineered, basically mass timber business, and they just started in that realm. Lots of VC money backing them. They started in this mass timber, modular, kind of built up a couple factories. And they saw an opportunity. They saw this light at the end of the tunnel. It turned out to be an actual train, but they said, oh, well, we're going to make modular mass timber. And then they're like, well, we're going to design it and we're going to manufacture it. Oh, we're going to be the contractor and we're going to build it and design it and make it. Oh, we're going to be the developer and there's vertically integrate every,
Right.
it's called scope creep and we've all seen get run over by it. And that's exactly what happened.
Right.
I think it really scared the industry, people, because they had a lot of money behind them and they really grew very quickly to say what we could do here. And they had the whole mass timber thing behind them and this real kind of sustainable story behind it. It's failed. Their Sidewalk Labs was another project that came out of a tech company that thought of this idea of what if we vertically integrate some sectors. I don't know. The R&D process and that innovation, it takes a lot of people to fail. And every time, hopefully, they get a little further. I think they've pushed that further and further along than it once was. Maybe somebody else picks up that stone and takes it a little further and the next person a little further until they see success. But to the comments I made earlier of this disconnected systems that we have of how an owner asked for a building to be made to the day the building's turned over and all the people that touch it and all the companies that touch it, I think there's a way that will get streamlined and be a lot more efficient. It'll eliminate mistakes. It'll eliminate waste. It'll save on cost. Those are really big things to fix, right? But if you're asking me what do I see in 10 years, I think there will be massive progress against some of those challenges.
Yeah, I hope so. I love the idea of being able to snap together these infrastructures because you can, in a logical way, so that you can unsnap the segments or enhance the segments or whatever.
There's a few things, too, that I think influence being a global business and a lot of my colleagues being on the European side. It's a policy-driven piece in Europe, and in North America, it's very private sector, right? It's always kind of been that way, right? It's not the government's not. I was blown away going to Greenfield 2 years ago, where the EPA put out this big announcement saying, "Hey, we're going to fully support EPDs and we're going to bring all this stuff." And I was like, "Did the government just hop over the private sector, like really driving demand and funding it and giving all these grants?" Amazing. Like there's hope. For the first time, I think the government moves so fast, no one even saw it happening.
Right.
But at the same time, I think there's some opportunities where we have this globalization, which we've always been down this road. And it's funny, we're in these tariff wars and trade wars and all those things. It's about globalization. But it comes back to some funny comments about people in the food industry talk about farm to table like it's a new idea.
Right.
Really? You mean you're going to grow the stuff really right where you're going to cook it and then you're going to serve it to the people? Like we build houses from the sticks that we harvested from the trees and the stones in the driveway? Right. Cycles are really fascinating to me, and I think that's one of the cycles that the building industry is going to go to is we're going to go back to this hyper-local, hyper-regional idea and that will solve some of those circularity, take-back, waste issues that we currently solve. So back to your question there a little while ago is in 10 years, I think we're going to solve some of those problems because these ecosystems, these microgrids, just we talk about power, to solve the power problem, we have microgrids. I think that microgrid or microeconomy popping up all over the country could solve a lot of these construction problems, right? It's an opportunity to solve within businesses and supply chain. It cuts the footprint of sending product from California to Florida. It keeps the high value of materials in a regional setting where you can just remanufacture and reuse. I also think we're going to get proof case, win or lose, all those targets and all those big ideas that everybody put out, a few years ago. We're going to start to get to the end of that 5 and 10 year cycle, and we're going to see. Did it work?
Right.
Did it make a difference? Did you change your company? Do you operate differently now?
Right.
And I think the C-suite and the leadership and the shareholders will see, did this really help us? Are you more profitable? Right? Did it change the culture? I think that we're going to get a little bit of a proof case, which is amazing, right? For the people that put the time in and the work and really said we're committed, take the fruit and take the win. For the people that just stood it up as a marketing ploy, you'll have another go, right? We need to really do this another time and really dig in, right? So because you'll have that, the competitive marketplace will change.
Right.
You'll have people that says, look what we achieved. And there'll be the others who's like, either we didn't set a target, the laggers, the last to adopt are going to have to come rapidly coming in.
Right.
And again, the roadmap to how it's done will be publicly available, right? And that'll allow those people to get on that on-ramp and really catch up.
I completely agree. Brent, we've talked about a lot.
We didn't cover anything. Jeez, that was...
Hey, man, thanks for coming into town, and thanks for coming on the show today.
I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank
you.
Hey,
if you liked that conversation, click the like button, and if you loved it, click subscribe. We'll see you, everybody. Have a good one.